Guys, we are live, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make homemade do-it-yourself mixes in mason jars, because mason jars are my favorite thing in the whole wide world. And these make fabulous, fabulous, fabulous gifts, or just to have on your pantry shelf ready to go to just make things faster for yourself when you are cooking. So I am excited to share this recipe with you, not only because it's frugal and it happens to taste amazing, but this is a really, really old recipe. This recipe is actually my great grandmother's chocolate cake recipe, and it doesn't get much better than when we bring chocolate into the picture. Can I get a holler? This girl right here loves chocolate. So what we're going to be doing in the mason jar today is we're going to be putting in the dry part of the recipe to give as gift giving. And anytime I move this jar, I've already got it all decorated up and there's a little jingle bell on there. You're going to hear we're going to create atmosphere, right? You're going to hear that jingle bell going. When you're picking your jar, I just love to use a mason jar because I've got hundreds and hundreds of mason jars. They're something that most people have already got on hand. But whenever you're doing something in a mason jar like this, where we're going to be adding things in, I prefer to use wide mouth. It's just easier to stuff the jar, so to speak, when you're using wide mouth. So this jar, I just am reusing actually a lid, because we can't re-can with used canning metal lids, but you can reuse them for dry goods. So it's a way to reuse things. So this is a used canning lid that of course has been washed, right? Then you've got your band, and I like to, if I'm giving this as a gift, I like to pretty it up. So I had just hot glued some pretty little ribbon there just on the outside of the band. So we have got our mason jar, and I've got a red ribbon there as well, and then jute twine with the jingle bell, and the recipe instructions to give to the recipient. So one of the easiest ways to do this is to use your canning funnel. So I've got my canning funnel. Some of you may have baking funnels. A funnel is just going to help you get the dry goods in there without making such a big old mess, because nobody likes to have to clean up a messy kitchen more than necessary, right? So first ingredients we've got going in is 2 cups of flour. Now you can use cake flour or you can use all-purpose. You could also use whole wheat pastry. This is one instance where I actually do not use my home ground flour. So I grind a lot of our flour here at home on the homestead, but because fresh ground flour does not have that shelf life, and if you're going to be giving this as a gift, you don't know how long the person will have it before they actually go to bake it. So this is one instance where I do recommend using some store-bought flour just to extend that shelf life and not actually grinding it at home. So this is organic all-purpose. You can use whatever flour that you so desire. All-purpose works great, hence the name, right? So we're just going to go ahead, 2 cups, and we're going to put that in the jar first. So I'm going to do my best to not make a mess here because somebody doesn't have their apron on in the kitchen this morning. So we're just going to go ahead and funnel that down in there. And if you wanted to use cake flour, you could just take out a tablespoon of flour from each cup. So take out 2 tablespoons total and add a tablespoon of cornstarch for each cup. So it would be minus 2 tablespoons total, and then you would add in 2 tablespoons of cornstarch total for cake flour. But I use all-purpose in this all the time, and that's how my grandmother's recipe was written. Great-grandmother's recipe was written, and so that works great. So we're going to funnel in. We've got our 2 cups of flour there as going into the jar. Next, we're putting in our cocoa powder, and this is a 1/2 cup of cocoa powder. So we're just going to go ahead and dump that one in there too. Then we've got a cup of sugar. And this, you can use whatever sugar you like if you've just got regular old white table sugar. This is actually evaporated cane juice. It's a little bit darker, and it's still got a little bit of the molasses in it. It's just slightly less processed than regular sugar, which is what I use exclusively in our home now. I don't actually buy regular white sugar. So we are going to get that in there. And then we need to add baking soda and baking powder. We need our leavening agents in there, and it's going to be a teaspoon of each. So your quart-size mason jar actually holds 4 cups volume total. But when we pour our dry ingredients in here, they've got a little bit of volume from the air and stuff. So right now, you're going to take your spoon, because if I were to just remove this funnel, stuff would fall out. It's not all the way in the jar. So get yourself this is a really big old serving spoon here that will fit in there. And we're going to just kind of work this in so that the air and it starts to actually pack down into the jar there. So we're going to work that all in. And alternatively, if you want this all mixed up so it actually just looks like full blended chocolate cake mix, like if you were used to buying the boxed cake mixes, You could mix this all up in a big bowl all together, these dry ingredients, and then pour it in. But like I said, I don't like to wash dishes any more than possible. So I just prefer to put it all in the jar. So here we've got all our dry ingredients, and you could, as well as you could continue to kind of just stir these together to mix the colors up, or you can just kind of leave them in the layers. So here you can see on the side, if my light isn't too bright there, we've kind of got the layers of the chocolate, the sugar, and then the flour. I'm gonna put that back on. And then you just screw your lid on, and here you have got, what did that take us? Maybe like 5 minutes. You've got a great gift in a jar. So now, of course, we've got our dry cake mix, but to be able to make the cake, we need the rest of the ingredients. So if you are going to be giving this for gift giving, then I have a little tag here that's got the instructions with the rest of the wet ingredients that you would add in order to bake the cake. So you could give this to someone and they could just follow this and they could bake the cake. Easy peasy. Or another alternative that you can do is to also give them, because once they use up the cake mix, trust me, this is the best chocolate cake in the whole wide world, because my great-grandmother made it and it really is awesome. It's been passed down. That's what I love about old family recipes that have been passed down from generation to generation to generation, because you know, if someone keeps making that recipe year after year after year and passing it down that long, it's good, right? It's like the ultimate test of a recipe. So I love my own family recipes that have been handed down, and I love getting other people's family recipes that were their grandmothers and their great-grandmothers that have been passed down. So of course, you want someone to be making and cooking from scratch more than just the one time that you give them the gift, right? So here is the recipe card with the entire recipe on it so they can continue making it for themselves. So the wet ingredients that that you will add in to actually make the cake, here on this little cute little tag here, is it's going to be 3/4 cup of mayonnaise. I know, right? Mayonnaise in a chocolate cake, trust me, makes the best chocolate cake. 1/2 cup of cold water, and then 1/2 cup of brewed coffee. Now this is not actually a mocha cake, but what that coffee does is it heightens the flavor of the chocolate on your palate, so it actually makes it taste more chocolatey, which is totally a good thing. And then a teaspoon of vanilla extract. You're just gonna mix that all together, put it in a well-greased and floured baking tin, cake pan, or cupcakes, and then you're gonna bake it in the oven. So you're not actually adding in a fresh egg. It does contain eggs because mayonnaise obviously has eggs in it as well as oil. So it just makes it super easy to whip up, and it is such a good cake. And of course, I can't show y'all something with all these fun little printout things and not give them to you so that you can make your gifts easy. So I have a free PDF download. So it comes on one sheet. So you will actually get printed out the entire recipe here. So you can put this in your recipe book, or you can give it away with a gift. Plus this cute little tag that you just cut out, punch a hole in, and you can tie on with jute, twine, or ribbon, or whatever you want to pretty up your jar to give it as a gift. So you can get that at melissaknorris.com/cake mix. And what that will do is it will take you actually to the full recipe that I've got up on my blog. And then in the resources on the page, it'll also come up as a pop-up. It'll say for the free printables, click here, click that, pop your email in, and it'll shoot you that download. I tested it this morning. It's like less than a minute. It'll be in your inbox. But it is actually in the book. So the Made from Scratch Life is my book, and it's on page 118. And then it also has a caramel frosting that goes on it, which is absolutely fabulous too if you are making the cake in there as well. And one of the super cool things, so this little recipe card here is one of the bonuses if you purchase the book, The Made from Scratch Life, which you can go to madefromscratchlife.com/bonuses. And we have blank recipe cards that you get as a bonus when you get the gift. So you can print out this recipe card and put your own recipes on it, because you can create any recipe that you want as a dry mix in the jar. All you do is just put the dry ingredients in there, because it's what activates the leavening agents, which in this case is baking powder and baking soda, is when we add our liquid. So you can put all of your dry ingredients in a jar. You just want to make sure that the total volume obviously does not exceed 4 cups if you're going to be using a quart-sized mason jar, so that it will all fit in there. And then you just put on the instructions on there on how to add the wet ingredients and to make the recipe. So if you've got a favorite homemade recipe that you want to pass on and give as gifts in a jars, it's super easy peasy to do. I just converted this one to show you how to do this one today. And I'll also be putting in the links as well. I've got some other homemade mixes. I got a thing for chocolate, especially when it comes to bacon and Christmas. And so I've got a fudgy brownie mix in a jar as well, and some other homemade mixes in jars that you can do yourself that you can make with home food storage. So just the ingredients that you got sitting in your pantry, and make those up and give them as gifts, or they're just so that you don't have to go to the grocery store, because none of us should be buying boxed cakes mixes anymore. Okay. You can make them into cupcakes, and I have the instructions right here in the book and on the recipe card as how to make them into cupcakes. And so if you're making them into cupcakes, you will be baking them at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what you bake the cake as well if you're doing it in a regular cake pan. But the cupcakes, you shorten your baking time, and it's been 16 minutes in my oven for the cupcakes, and they make fabulous cupcakes. Usually every birthday, it's either a cake or cupcakes, depending on what we're doing. But one of the great things too is this is really, really frugal. It's cheaper than if you're buying boxed cake mix, and it doesn't have any of the weird hydrogenized oils and different GMO ingredients that are often found in those processed boxed items that we get at the store. And so I got to tell y'all a little story about how I started making my great-grandmother's cake recipe, because when I was a newlywed and first married, I always used cake mixes. Now, my mom is a from-scratch baker, but I didn't do a ton of baking at home. She was such a good baker that she usually did all of the baking. So when I first got married, which was at 18, I was a young bride, I got the cake mixes. So if I was going to make a cake and stuff, like I didn't buy cakes, but I was going to make cakes, but I used cake mixes. And I will never forget, I went to make a cake for something, and lo and behold, I didn't have cake mix in my pantry. And I still needed to bake a cake. And I'm like, what do people do? And this was, I am totally telling on myself, y'all here, this was before the internet. Can you believe that? Or before the internet was used widely, and I didn't have it at my house. I'm not even sure if I had a computer at that point. So I had to go and get the recipe from my mom on how to make a chocolate cake. And after I realized how easy peasy it is to make a fabulous cake that tastes better than the cake mix, in my opinion, at home, and so much cheaper without having to run to the store, was like hooked, sold. And I have not had, I couldn't tell you the last time I bought a cake mix or used a cake mix. It has been years upon years upon years, because I always go to this one for the chocolate, which is my favorite. So I wanted to share it with you guys this morning. Free printables is at melissaknorris.com/cake mix. And then all the info for getting the book and over $20 worth of bonuses is at madefromscratchlife.com. You can pretty up the jar however you want. If you just want to tie some red ribbon on there and put the little instruction here on there, you can do that too. You can use burlap, you can use lace. I mean, you can do whatever you want to pretty it up. I actually just think with some jute twine and some red ribbon, just really simple to tie it on there with some red ribbon, that would work too. So you don't have to go all fancy. I like to put the little jingle bell on there just because I like jingle bells and I love Christmas. But you can do, you can pretty that jar up however you want. Or if you just have the jar and you just want to cut this out and give it to them, you can do that too. So you've got lots of options for your creativity or how much time you have left. But this makes great gifts. It makes a great gift all by itself. And it's also a great thing if you're making up, baskets of homemade goodies. It's great to tuck in there as well. Oh, Jeanette, the pie crust recipe. I know, I got to tell y'all the funniest story. So I love, like I said, passing on my great-grandmother's recipes. So my great-grandmother was like an awesome baker, and I never actually got to eat much of the stuff by her hand because she passed away when I was very, very little, and I just have a few slight memories of her. But I feel connected to her every time I make her recipes, which is a super cool thing about recipes. So her pie crust recipe is in here as well, and it's also up on the blog. And her pie crust recipe is amazing. So I've been blessed to have this pie crust recipe my whole life, so I never knew the struggle, y'all, that people have had with pie crust recipes. But apparently pie crusts, they can be a tricky beast, okay? So the day before Thanksgiving, I'm at work, and I get a text from a friend of mine, and she says, I cannot believe how easy this pie crust is to roll out, and if it even tastes half as good, as enjoyable as it has been to work with, I am sold. So Thanksgiving comes, because that's when obviously she was going to be having her pies, and I don't hear anything from her. And I'm like, well, it's Thanksgiving, we're all busy with family. I don't think a whole lot of it. So then I see her the next Sunday at church, and I'm kind of nervous. I'm like, oh, maybe she didn't like the taste. Maybe they didn't turn out because I haven't heard anything from her, right? Okay, both her and her husband came up to me and let me know that it was the best pie crust they have ever had. They've thrown out all their other recipes, and that's the number one from now on out. And I've gotten reader emails as well from people who have had a hard time with pie crust, and then they tried my great-grandmother's pie crust recipe, and they've had major success. First time they've ever had awesome pie crust with no failure ever. So I can't really take the credit because all I did was use my great-grandmother's recipe, but I do have to say it is pretty amazing, and I get that feedback from everybody who's tried it. So if you're looking for a pie crust recipe, it's in the book, and it's also at melisaknorris.com under the recipe section as well. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.